Good morning. The scripture lesson this morning is from Hebrews 11:1. Now faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. Why have we gathered here today? When did our family reunion start and why? What is it that has brought us together each June since the 80s? I believe it is to honor our heritage, faith, and family roots, and the opportunity to reconnect. This weekend, a little over 100 people have gathered in Cape Porpoise to honor and remember George and Edna Seavey, lifelong residents of Cape Porpoise. Who were George and Edna? Edna Florence Benson was born in Kennebunkport on August 17, 1895, the oldest of Mary and Ernest Benson's 10 children. Grammy was a stay-at-home mom. Her days were spent cooking, sewing, gardening, doing whatever necessary to feed and clothe her growing family. My grandfather, as was his father, were well-known blacksmiths in Kennebunkport, with their shop next to where the Masonic Temple now stands. A replica can be seen at the Kennebunkport Historical Society, adjacent to Arundel Cemetery. Grandpa Benson always had a love of horses and owned a couple which were stabled in the barn in back of the house. The older children, including my mother, used to do harness racing at Kennebunk Beach. My mother especially loved to exercise the horses. George was born in Cape Porpoise, March 4, 1893, to Marietta Wiles and George Fred Seavey, the youngest of 7 children. Their home overlooked Paddy Creek, and by the standards of those days, large. The 3 floors were able to accommodate the family, plus numerous boarders who lived there and contributed to the family coffers. My grandfather and his father were carpenters, as were his 3 sons. Dad and his brothers were expected to work in the family business, which included not only carpentry, but for a while a grocery hardware store. During the winter, ice was harvested on the mill pond and stored in the ice house until summer, when it was delivered to hotels, restaurants, and summer homes. The hours were long, the pay minimal. This was their heritage. In the early 20th century, education was not the emphasis that it is today. My parents did not graduate from high school. It was reported at that time, Dad announced he had enough knowledge and went to work in the family business. Mother, as the eldest child, had plenty to do and hands-on knowledge about the do's and don'ts of raising a family. The newspaper write-up of their wedding noted that she had been in charge of the Japanese store in Kennebunkport Village. Unfortunately, there doesn't seem to be any other details about the store. Research revealed that my grandfather Seavey acquired numerous plots of land in Cape Porpoise, overlooking Paddy Creek. As each child was ready to marry, he or she was given a plot on which to build their home. For some reason, the eldest son, J. Frank, built his home about a quarter of a mile near a town, 2 doors from the Heidells, where he was able to build a big barn and from which he conducted the family business. Emma married and moved to Massachusetts. The others built houses on what was known as Seavey's Corner, all close to their parents. Dad's land was at the head of Paddy Creek, where Stedman and Betsy now live. He started their home in 1912 with $200. Much of the materials came from the Parker House in Kennebunkport, which was being demolished, and from other homes being remodeled. Just another example of how resourceful the Seaveys had to be. A year later, on October 15, 2013, George and Edna were married at Dad's parents' home by Reverend Thomas Kane of the Baptist Church in Kennebunkport, where Mother was very active. Their first winter was spent with Dad's parents as their home was not yet livable. During the winter of 1916-17, work was scarce, so they moved to Lynn, Massachusetts, where Dad was able to get a job driving a truck. The rest of their married life was spent in Cape Porpoise. Their first child, my eldest sister Ruth, was born in 1916, and 6 more children were born in the next 14 years. In 1926, their 2.5-year-old daughter, Mary Elizabeth, contracted whooping cough and scarlet fever, and the family was quarantined. As a result, Dad moved to his brother and sister-in-law's home so that he could continue to work. However, the doctor soon ordered him home as Mother was exhausted trying to care for a 6th child and 5 other children, including an infant who happened to be Harrison. No one person could be on duty 24/7. There were no miracle drugs in those days, no hospice or home health. It soon became evident Mary Elizabeth was seriously ill, as she had also developed pneumonia. A nurse was brought in to help with her care and was with Mother and Dad as she succumbed to a coughing spasm on a Sunday afternoon. With the family still quarantined, her funeral service had to be held on our front porch. With the other children upstairs, Mother and Dad could only observe from the front window. Mary Elizabeth's death left its scars, but my eldest sister said that our parents never took it out on the other children. That year's town report included the name of George Seavey as having received assistance from the town, a most embarrassing situation for a man who was self-sufficient and proud. The home that was started in 1912 was not completely finished until 40 years later. Dad worked on it as funds became available. Was this what the new bride expected? Probably not, but she never whined, never complained. It was a constant struggle to stretch the budget and to accomplish all the work she had set herself up to do. Mother could probably have taken shortcuts, but in the end, I believe her standards rubbed off on her offspring, making my siblings better parents and citizens. She was a meticulous housekeeper, an excellent cook, skills which were taught to both her sons and daughters. And in those days, men's shirts and girls' dresses were starched, and after drying had to be sprinkled before they were ironed. And Dad deserves credit too, for he was always there with a helping hand when not working, and he too knew how to iron. We also all learned to set a proper table and to iron clothes. Since I was their last child, most of the foregoing has been relayed to me by my older siblings. I am sure my parents were just beginning to feel that maybe they had turned the corner to better times when I arrived. Through all the years, Mother had struggled with health problems, and they seemed to continue. These issues were not discussed freely, but we do know that shortly after I was born, Mother was sent to a Boston hospital for surgery. All indications point to cancer. My eldest sister and brother left home when I was 4. Ruth went to the University of Maine, as the folks felt their children should have a good education. Fred took a job in New Hampshire. There were then 4 of us living at home, and in 1941, Polly married, and John moved to Connecticut to work as an apprentice at Pratt Whitney. Harrison and I were then the only 2 at home, and probably that is why we became so close. Mother was again having health problems, so we spent a lot of time together doing dishes, studying, me yes, Harrison who knows, and playing cards. In 1944, with World War II raging, Harrison went into the service, and as did so many in Cape Porpoise. Dad went to work at the Navy Yard. Their financial situation was finally improving, as for the first time in his life, Dad had steady employment and a weekly paycheck. In 1947, they faced another major crisis as the forest fire swept through Maine, including Cape Porpoise and the surrounding areas. The question most often asked of my parents, why did your house escape when everything else around you burned? And there was no answer. My brother Harrison and I felt strongly about recording how this had affected our family. So in 1997, with the help of my niece Helen, published our family's experience. My parents' desire to open a bed and breakfast came to fruition in the early 1950s when Dad put on an addition to the house. The garage with a freezer room, storage room, and a gift shop was added with bedrooms upstairs. And these were the sleeping quarters for them and the family in the summer. Their first guests, Neil's parents, who continued to come for at least twice a year as long as the Seabreeze was open. Neil came to Maine one weekend with his parents, and I happened to be home, so his dad fixed us up. Our first date was a square dance at the Fireman's Hall, now known as Atlantic Hall, and we continued to date whenever we could both be here at the Cape at the same time. Our paths eventually went in different directions, although we remained friends and kept in touch through his parents. And how do I fit into all of this? During my childhood, my sister Polly was primarily responsible for my care as mother's health problems continued. Older siblings helped out, but much credit for who I am and my path in life is due to my parents' best friends, Hazel and Walter Perkins. They had only one son who was killed in the war and were always more than willing to take care of me. Throughout my growing years, Aunt Hazel and Uncle Walter were always there for me, and I spent a lot of my teenage years with them. It was through Aunt Hazel's efforts that I went to Massachusetts after high school to work in a bank, a career I enjoyed for 40 years. They were my second set of parents. Dad died in 1962, just before their 49th wedding anniversary, and 3 years later, Mother passed away. So what was the glue that held this family together? In good times and in bad, in extremely tight financial circumstances and family tragedies, they and all of us children had to be resourceful. There was a huge vegetable garden, and during the fall, the produce was canned and stored for winter usage. Mother always had a beautiful flower garden. We all knew how to weed. Chickens were raised to provide meat and eggs. My brother would go clamming, and fish at the pier was very cheap. None of us ever recalled going without a meal. Mother could be very creative, although not always to our liking. Dad and my brothers cut and split the wood, which kept our home warm in winter. But I should remind you that most folks in town did the same. As soon as we were old enough, we all found ways to earn money, whether it be caddying, clamming, babysitting, waitressing. We too were taught to be resourceful. We grew up without telephones, radios, TV, and computers, although in the late 1950s, my folks did acquire a small television with rabbit ears. Socialization was by participating in community events. Dad loved to be involved in the local plays put on at the Fireman's Hall and encouraged his children to also participate. He was active in both the Masons and Eastern Star, holding offices throughout. Mother joined him in these activities, but always in a behind-the-scene roles. All of us were baptized and attended the United Methodist Church, now known as the Church on the Cape. Our pew was, 1, 2, 3, where Patty's son David is sitting now. Fairfields were over here. We attended Sunday school or youth programs, and Mother, when she could, attended the Ladies' Aid. The Santa at the church's Christmas party had an familiar voice. And so, what else but their unspoken faith could have carried them through these years? What is their heritage? The people here today, I think they're mostly over here, I am their only living offspring. The others are in-laws, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and in some cases, longtime family friends. Their sons and daughters who are no longer with us were mothers, fathers, churchgoers who raised their children in the Christian faith. While we have not always seen eye to eye, these differences have never kept us apart. For the most part, the family strives to attend family dinners, weddings, reunions. The Seavey saga has kept the family connected since 1970 with those who wish to participate and subscribe, free to do so. I am proud of what my parents accomplished, and I think they would be proud of this weekend's gathering. The bonds formed among us and the attendance here today. May it ever be so. Family. A family is a circle of strength and love. With every birth and every union, the circle grows. Every joy shared adds more love. Every crisis conquered makes the circle stronger. Amen.